Welcome to Night Sky, a place where calm stories help quiet the mind and gently guide you to sleep. If you're ending your day right now, allow yourself a moment of peace. Find a comfortable position, relax your shoulders, and take a slow, calm breath. Breathe in and slowly breathe out. Once again, breathe in and gently breathe out. If you enjoy falling asleep to stories like this, you can leave a like on this video. It helps more people discover peaceful bedtime stories. And if you'd like to return here each night, you can also subscribe to the channel. Now allow your thoughts to slow down and let the story gently carry you into a world of imagination where the night is quiet, safe, and filled with calm. Night always fell slowly at the small mountain station. First, the last orange light of day faded above the tree line. Then the shadows lengthened between the tracks. And finally, silence fell. It wasn't complete silence, though. Somewhere in the distance, metal switches creaked. The wind rustled through the pine needles. Sometimes a night owl would call out, and one more sound. Quiet, familiar. The distant clatter of train wheels. An old conductor was sitting on the platform. His name was Jan. His cap was already a little faded. His navy blue coat had seen many winters, and his pockets always smelled faintly of tea and paper. Jan sat on a wooden bench. He slowly stirred with a spoon in a metal mug. Warm steam rose into the air. The tea smelled of linden. The station was almost empty. Only one lamp was lit above the departure board. Its light flickered slightly, as if it, too, were tired from the day. Jan looked toward the tracks. He smiled calmly. "It'll be here soon," he said quietly to himself. That train came every night. The last train through the mountains. It wasn't fast. It was never in a hurry. It moved slowly through the valleys, through the forests, and through small stations that most people had long forgotten. But Jan knew them all. Every bend in the tracks, every bridge, every scent of the night air, and every story. Sometimes someone else would board that train. Night travelers, people tired from the day, or those who simply needed a peaceful journey. Jan would always say then, "Good evening. This is the last train through the mountains. Have a peaceful journey." He never said more than that. There was no need. A light appeared in the distance, a small yellow star among the trees. Then a familiar sound rang out. Clack, 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 the train wheels. Jan slowly got up from the bench. He adjusted his cap. He walked a few steps along the platform. The boards creaked quietly under his shoes. The train emerged from the curve. The old locomotive was breathing heavily. Steam rose from the chimney. The lights in the cars shone softly and warmly. The train came to a slow stop. With a slight hiss, the door of the first car opened. Jan stepped inside. The car smelled of wood and a little like dust. The ceiling lights cast a soft, golden glow. There were only a few people inside. An elderly woman with a book, a young man leaning against the window, and a girl sitting by the window. Jan walked slowly through the car. "Good evening," he said gently. The girl looked at him. "Is this really the last train?" Jan nodded. "Yes, the last one tonight." "And where is it going?" The conductor smiled slightly. "Through the mountains." The girl thought for a moment. "And what's in the mountains?" Jan looked out the window, at the dark outline of the trees, at the distant lights in the valley. Then he said calmly, "Stories." The girl tilted her head. "What kind of stories?" Jan sat down in the empty seat next to her. The train started moving slowly. The wheels began to tap rhythmically against the tracks. Tap, tap, tap. Like a calm clock, like a breath. Jan looked out the window at the night. The forest moved slowly. The trees stood silently in the moonlight. "Do you see that bridge over there?" he asked. The girl pressed her nose against the window. "Yes. An old railroad guard used to live there." The girl smiled slightly. "Will you tell me about him?" Jan closed his eyes for a moment, as if searching for a memory. The train kept moving, slowly. The night was calm, and the story was just beginning. "A long time ago," Jan said quietly, "this bridge looked completely different." His voice was calm, soft, like the rocking of a train car, like the night wind through the trees. And the train kept going through the mountains, slowly, very slowly, and it was in no hurry. The train rode calmly through the night. The wheels clattered against the rails in a steady rhythm. Clack, clack, clack. That sound was like a calm breath. The car swayed gently. The ceiling lamps cast a warm, soft light on the wooden walls. Drops of moisture slowly appeared on the windows. The night in the mountains was cool. The girl sitting by the window couldn't take her eyes off the darkness beyond the glass. The forest moved slowly by. The trees looked like silent guards standing by the tracks. Sometimes the moonlight appeared between them, sometimes a small clearing, sometimes a thin ribbon of a stream. Jan sat next to her, calmly. His hands rested on his knees. His fingers were a little rough from many years of work, but his movements were always slow and gentle. For a moment, silence reigned in the car. All that could be heard was the clatter of the wheels, the gentle rustle of the wind, and the quiet rustle of the pages of the older woman's book. The girl looked at Jan. "And that bridge guard," she said quietly. "Did he really live there?" Jan smiled slightly. "Yes, a very long time ago." The train had just entered the valley. A river appeared outside the window, silver in the moonlight, and above it, an old railway bridge. The metal structure creaked softly as the train's wheels touched its tracks. The girl pressed her face against the window. "Is that the bridge?" "Yes," said Jan. His voice was soft, as if he were telling her something he knew very well. "A man named Antoni used to live here." The girl listened intently. The train slowly passed over the river. Beneath them, the water flowed calmly. Sometimes the light from the train cars reflected off it. Jan continued. "Antoni was a track guard. Every night he would leave his little house by the bridge and check the rails." The girl narrowed her eyes. "Alone?" "Yes, alone." "Wasn't he afraid?" Jan shook his head slightly. "No, he liked the night." The train left the bridge and entered the woods again. The forest was denser, darker, but the light from the cars illuminated a stretch of track ahead of them. Jan spoke slowly. "Antoni knew every sound in this valley. He knew when the river flowed faster. He knew when the wind changed direction. Even the trees seemed to know him." The girl smiled slightly. "Did anyone ever visit him?" Jan stared out the window for a moment, as if he were seeing something from many years ago. "Sometimes the night train would stop here." "This one?" "Very similar." The girl looked around the car. Wooden seats, warm lamplight, the quiet movement of the train. "Did you know him?" Jan nodded. "I was a young conductor's assistant back then." The girl's eyes widened. "Really?" Jan laughed softly. "Yes, I was wearing a hat that was too big for me back then." The older woman with the book smiled when she heard that. The train continued on. It slowly climbed uphill. The wheels worked harder. Clack, clack, clack. The rhythm was a little deeper, a little slower. Jan continued talking. Antony always waited by the tracks with a lantern. When the train passed, he'd hold it high. Why? To say that everything is all right. The girl looked out into the night. And if it wasn't? Jan was silent for a moment. The train car swayed gently. Somewhere in the distance, the wind howled. Then Jan said calmly, then he'd light the second lantern. And then what? Then the train would slow down. The girl thought for a moment. Did he ever light that second one? Jan looked at the bridge, which had just disappeared around the bend in the tracks. His eyes were calm, but a little pensive. Yes. The girl leaned in closer. What happened? Jan exhaled slowly, as if the memory were very old and very quiet. One winter night, the river froze over. The ice began to press against the bridge's pillars. The train car rocked again. The train was now climbing higher into the mountains. The first rocky slopes appeared outside the window. Jan continued speaking. Antony saw a crack in the tracks. The girl held her breath. And he lit the second lantern? Jan nodded. Yes. For a moment, silence fell over the car again. The train continued on through the night. The forest was thinning out. There were more stars in the sky. The girl looked at Jan. Did the train manage to stop? Jan smiled calmly. Yes. Then he added quietly, Antony saved a lot of people back then. The girl looked out the window for a moment longer, as if she were trying to see the little guardhouse, somewhere among the trees. But the night was already deep. The bridge was far behind them. The train kept going, slowly, very calmly. Jan leaned back more comfortably in his seat. There are many stories like that in the mountains, he said gently. The girl smiled slightly. Will you tell me the next one? Jan looked at a curve in the tracks ahead of them. A small light from the next station appeared in the distance. Of course, he said quietly, because we're about to pass a place where a lone lighthouse once stood on the mountainside. The train rolled on, clack, 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 and the night grew even quieter. The train climbed higher and higher into the mountains. Its movement was calm, slow. The wheels tapped rhythmically against the steel rails. Tap, tap, tap. The sound echoed through the car, like a quiet lullaby. Some passengers had already begun to close their eyes. An elderly woman with a book set it down on her lap. Her fingers still held the page where she had stopped reading, but her eyes were already closed. The young man by the window was breathing calmly. His head rested lightly against the window. The warm light from the lamps swayed gently with the movement of the train car. The girl was still sitting next to Jan. She was looking out into the night. Outside the window, the mountains were getting closer. Dark slopes rose high above the tracks. Old spruce trees grew among the rocks. Their branches swayed gently in the wind. The moon hung over the valley, big, bright. Its light made the rocks look silver. The girl spoke very quietly. Where is that lantern? Jan looked up. He looked toward the mountainside. "We'll see it in a moment," he said calmly. The train slowly entered a long curve in the tracks. The car tilted slightly. Then a small light appeared on the mountainside. Tiny, but distinct, like a star lost among the trees. The girl spotted it right away. "There," she whispered. Jan nodded. "Right there." The train was moving slowly. For a moment, the streetlight was directly in front of the car. Then it began to recede, but its calm glow was still visible. The girl watched it with curiosity. "Who turns it on?" Jan was silent for a moment, as if he were listening to something in his memory. Then he said quietly, "A long time ago, a woman lived there." The girl turned to him. "Alone?" "Yes." "Why?" Jan smiled slightly. "Because she liked the silence of the mountains." The train entered a short tunnel. For a moment, the car was filled with a deeper sound. The clatter of the wheels echoed off the stone walls. Clack, clack, clack. The echo was soft and calm. After a moment, the train emerged into the open again. The lantern was still shining on the hillside. Jan continued speaking. The woman's name was Helena. The girl listened intently. Helena lived in a small wooden house. It stood exactly where you see that light. And why did she light the lantern? Jan looked out the window. For the trains. The girl furrowed her brow slightly. But trains have their own lights. Jan nodded. That's true. For a moment, all that could be heard was the calm rhythm of the ride. Then he added, "But winters used to be very harsh in these mountains." The girl looked at the lantern again. "And was it needed back then?" "Yes." Jan spoke slowly, as if every word flowed along with the train's movement. During snowstorms, the locomotive's lights often disappeared into the white fog. You could hardly see the tracks. The girl imagined the snow. Lots of snow, wind, a white night. Jan continued, and then, from a distance, you could see a single small lantern on the mountainside. The girl smiled slightly. And the engineer knew where the road was. Exactly. The train passed a small bridge over a stream. The water flowed quietly between the stones. In the moonlight, it looked like a silver ribbon. Jan leaned back more comfortably in his seat. Helena lit that lantern every night. Always. Always. The girl thought for a moment. She must have been a very patient person. Jan smiled. Yes, very. The train car rocked gently. Somewhere in the back of the train, someone yawned quietly. The air in the car was warm. It smelled a little like wood, a little like tea, a little like the night. Jan continued speaking. When I was young, our train used to pass through here almost every night. The girl looked at him. And you could always see the lighthouse. Always. For a moment, they both looked out the window. The small light on the mountainside was still there. There's one more valley ahead of us. The girl looked at him sleepily. Is there another story there? Jan nodded. Yes. His voice was even calmer than before. A story about a station where trains stop only for a moment, but memories stay there for a very long time. The girl rested her head against the seat back. Her eyelids were starting to feel heavy. The train rocked gently, and the night in the mountains grew ever quieter. The train continued on through the mountains. The rhythm of the wheels was calm and steady. Clack, clack, clack. That sound filled the car like a gentle melody. Many people were already asleep. An elderly woman rested her head against the window. The book still rested on her lap. A young man was breathing slowly and deeply. The movement of the train rocked him gently, like a boat on calm water. The lights shone warmly. Shadows moved softly across the walls of the train car. The girl was sitting next to Jan. Her eyes were already half closed, but she was still listening, quietly, intently. The train emerged from the dense forest. A wide valley opened up before them. The moon illuminated it with a bright, silvery light. Fog drifted among the grasses, delicate, light, like the calm breath of the earth. Jan looked out the window. His face was calm, but a hint of memory appeared in his eyes. "We'll be stopping at a small station in a moment," he said quietly. The girl lifted her eyelids. "What station?" "A station that few people remember." The train slowly began to slow down. The clatter of the wheels grew slower. Clack, clack, clack. A small light appeared in the distance, then a second, and a third. A small station emerged from the fog. A wooden platform, an old building with a red roof, a single lamp hanging above the door. Its light was soft and warm. The train came to a very gentle stop, as if it didn't want to disturb the silence of the place. For a moment, no one moved. The car exuded calm. Jan stood up slowly. "This is the Valley of Silence station," he said. The girl looked out the window. "I've never heard of it." Jan smiled slightly. "Most people haven't." The train doors opened quietly. There was no one on the platform. Only the fog drifted slowly over the planks. And somewhere in the distance, you could hear a stream. Quiet, peaceful. Jan stepped out onto the platform for a moment. The girl watched him through the window. The conductor stood by the lamp. He looked at the station building, as if he were seeing something from many years ago. After a moment, he returned to the car. He sat down next to her again. "This station used to be full of people," he said. The girl listened quietly. Travelers from all over used to come here. Some went on to the mountains, others went home. The train was still standing motionless. The locomotive's engine breathed quietly. Jan continued. "But this station was also a place of farewells." The girl fell deep in thought. "Goodbyes?" Jan nodded. "Yes." There was a moment of silence. The kind of silence that wasn't sad, more like peaceful, full of memories. Jan looked out the window. "Do you see that bench over there?" The girl turned her head. An old wooden bench stood on the platform, slightly tilted, a little faded from the sun and rain. "Yes," Jan spoke softly. "Two friends used to sit there." The girl listened intently to his voice. The train still stood in the silence of the valley. "One of them was leaving for a long way," Jan said. "For a long time. For a very long time." The girl looked at the bench. She imagined two people sitting there in the lamplight. Jan continued. "They talked for a very long time. About travels, about the mountains, about life." The girl asked quietly. "And then?" Jan smiled slightly. "Then the train left." The train trembled slightly at that moment, as if it were remembering that moment. "Did they ever meet again?" the girl asked. Jan looked at the fog over the platform. "Yes." "Really?" "Many years later." The girl smiled dreamily. That was a good answer. The train was slowly getting ready to continue on its way. The locomotive sighed softly. Steam rose above the tracks. Jan said calmly, "You know, some places hold memories." The girl nodded slightly. Her eyes were almost closed. "Do you think that this station does too?" Jan looked out the window once more, at the bench, at the lamp, at the fog. "Yes," he said very quietly. "This station remembers many peaceful stories." The train started moving. Very slowly, the platform began to move past the window. The station lamp grew distant. Then it vanished into the milky fog of the valley. The girl settled more comfortably into her seat. The train was rocking gently again. Clack, clack, clack. Jan spoke even more quietly than before. The last stretch of the journey through the mountains lies ahead of us. The girl was almost asleep, but she whispered, "Is there another story there?" Jan smiled. Yes. His voice was very gentle now. A story about a place where night trains slow down, so the mountains can fall asleep peacefully. The train kept moving, and the night grew quieter and quieter. The train kept going, slowly, peacefully. The wheels kept hitting the rails in the same rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. That sound was so familiar, it almost faded into the background. Like a calm heartbeat, the car was almost completely silent. Most of the passengers were asleep. An elderly woman was breathing steadily. Her book had slipped slightly to the side. A young man rested his head more comfortably against the window. His breathing was deep and calm. The ceiling lights shone softly. Their light was even warmer now, like the light of small campfires in the middle of the night. The girl next to Jan was also beginning to fall asleep. Her eyelids were heavy. She was breathing slowly, but she was still listening. The train emerged from another bend in the tracks, and suddenly, a vast valley opened up before them. It was wide, quiet, peaceful. The mountains surrounding it looked like huge, dark waves frozen in place. The moon hung high above them. Its light spilled across the slopes like silver. The fog lay low over the grass. It moved slowly between the rocks and small streams. Jan looked out the window. He had always liked this stretch of road. "This is the valley of the sleeping mountains," he said quietly. The girl stirred slightly. "Why sleeping?" Her voice was already very sleepy. Jan replied calmly, "Because here the mountains seem to be resting." The train began to move even more slowly, as if it knew that this place demanded silence. Tap, tap, clack. The sound of the wheels grew softer, quite soothing. Jan continued speaking. "Long ago, the people who lived in these mountains believed that at night, the mountains fell asleep." The girl barely opened her eyes. "The mountains sleep?" Jan smiled slightly. "That's what they used to say." The train glided through the valley like a calm boat. A cool scent of grass hung over the tracks. Somewhere in the distance, the river murmured in the night. A gentle breeze swept across the slopes. Jan continued his story. "They also said that if someone walks through this valley very quietly, they might hear the mountains breathing." The girl smiled dreamily. "And you, did you hear it?" Jan looked at the slopes, at the peaceful contours of the mountains. Then he answered quietly, "Maybe once." The girl was almost asleep. "What did it sound like?" Jan was silent for a moment. The train glided on, slowly, clack, tap. Finally, he said, "Like a deep breath." The car swayed slightly. One of the lights flickered for a moment, and then it shone calmly again. Jan continued speaking. "Train drivers always slow down in this valley. Why? So as not to wake the mountains." The girl laughed quietly, but it was already almost a sleepy laugh. "Do you think they're really sleeping?" Jan looked out the window. "I think everything rests a little at night." The train crossed a small wooden bridge. A stream flowed beneath it. Its water was clear and bright in the moonlight. Jan settled back more comfortably in his seat. His voice was even gentler now. "Even trains, The girl didn't answer. She was falling asleep. Her breathing had become steady, calm. Jan looked at her for a moment, then back to the mountains. The valley was huge and very quiet. The train moved slowly through it, as if it didn't want to disturb the peace of the place. After a long moment, Jan said, almost in a whisper, "The last station is just beyond this valley." No one in the car heard him. Everyone was asleep. The wheels kept rolling along the tracks, clack, clack, tap. But the sound was getting softer and softer, like a lullaby. Jan looked once more at the peaceful mountain slopes. Then he closed his eyes for a moment. The train continued on through the night, and the valley of the sleeping mountains was slowly falling behind them. The final leg of the journey lay ahead of them. Very peaceful, very quiet. The train continued on through the night, slowly, calmly. The wheels moved along the tracks in the same rhythm that had accompanied the journey from the start. Clack, clack, tap. The sound was soft, lulling, like a peaceful lullaby known only to night trains. Silence reigned in the car. Warm lamps glowed softly under the ceiling. Their light was subdued, delicate. Shadows moved slowly across the wooden walls of the car. All the passengers were already asleep. The elderly woman was breathing calmly. The book lay closed on her lap. The young man by the window was fast asleep. The movement of the train gently rocked his shoulders. The girl sitting next to Jan had also fallen asleep. Her head rested against the soft back of the seat. Her breathing was steady, calm, like the quiet rhythm of the night. Jan sat motionless. He looked out the window. The night was slowly beginning to change. A very faint glow appeared on the distant horizon. It wasn't dawn yet, but the night already knew that morning would soon arrive. The mountains surrounding the tracks were now calm, silent, like great sleeping guardians of the valley. The train slowly emerged from the last curve. Lights appeared in the distance, small, warm, flickering in the cool air. Jan knew them well. He smiled slightly. "Last stop," he whispered very quietly. The locomotive slowed down. The wheels began to roll even more slowly. Tap, clack. The car swayed gently. The train pulled into a small platform. The station was small. A few lamps, a wooden building, an old clock hanging above the entrance. It showed a very early hour. It was still before dawn. The train came to a gentle stop, almost silently, as if it didn't want to wake any of the passengers. Jan stood up slowly. His movements were calm and quiet. He walked a few steps through the car. He checked the door. He looked at the sleeping passengers. He paused for a moment by the girl. He adjusted her scarf slightly. Then he returned to the train car door. He opened them very quietly. Outside, the air was cool, fresh. It smelled of wet grass and morning mist. The first bright line of dawn appeared over the mountains, very delicate, like the soft light of a lamp lit somewhere far away. Jan stepped out onto the platform. The wooden planks creaked slightly under his shoes. He looked at the mountains, at the track they had arrived on, at the peaceful valley behind them. The train rested quietly by the platform. The locomotive's engine breathed calmly, like someone who had just finished a long journey. Jan closed his eyes for a moment. He listened to the morning. The birds were slowly beginning to wake up in the trees. Somewhere in the distance, the wind rustled. The fog drifted softly over the tracks. After a moment, Jan opened his eyes, and he smiled slightly, because he knew something that only night train conductors know. Every journey has its peaceful end, but the tracks always lead further, always somewhere else. Jan returned to the car. He closed the door. He sat down in his seat again. The train was taking a short break here. The passengers were still asleep. The girl stirred slightly in her sleep. A peaceful smile appeared on her face. Maybe she was dreaming of mountains. Maybe about a lantern on a hillside. Maybe about quiet stations and peaceful trains. Jan looked out the window once more. Dawn was slowly brightening the sky. The stars were fading one by one. The mountains were beginning to wake from their night's sleep. And the last night train was ending its peaceful journey. The wheels were no longer clattering. The track was silent. The car was quiet. For a moment, the whole world seemed very peaceful, as if it too were resting. Jan settled back more comfortably in his seat. He closed his eyes. And so, our story slowly comes to an end. I hope this gentle tale helped you relax and prepare for a peaceful sleep. If you enjoy bedtime stories like this, you can leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to return here whenever you need a calm night story. Now let the quiet of the night surround your thoughts and allow sleep to come naturally. Good night and sweet dreams.